You know those arguments that you have with people out here in your 3D reality? Do you know where they stemmed from? They stem from our imagination. Basically, the conversations we have within ourselves with other people, if they are argumentative, then you are recreating that event and it will manifest out here in your 3D reality, and you will bump into or encounter that experience, that imaginal act you had arguing with somebody is going to come to fruition. So let's see how we change that. Let's dive in, my lovelies. Well, welcome to the channel, my lovelies. My name is Sarah, otherwise known as Neville O'Clock, because I'm a complete Nevilleaholic. I read, share, study, and apply his teachings every day. That's what we need to do, my lovelies, apply his teachings. So, the story is a famous one from Neville. We call it, in the Neville business, we call it the costume designer's story. It's actually his wife that he's talking about. His wife has a boss like we all do, but he didn't recognize how wonderful her work was. He didn't get along with her and vice versa because simply she was having an argument with him every morning on the way to work. And fabulous Neville, being the darling that he is, tells us exactly how to rectify that happening in her world. Let's dive in, my lovelies. So this is one of his radio lectures. It's number 2. It's from 1951. Let's see what he says here. In his usual Neville tone, he says, "Daily we pass some stranger on the street and observe him muttering to himself, carrying on an imaginary argument with one not present." Have you found yourself doing that? I know you have. I've done it in the past, and now we don't, since we're living the Neville life. He says he is arguing with vehemence, the fear or hatred, with fear or hatred, not realizing that he is setting in motion by his imagination an unpleasant event which he will presently encounter. So right there in that paragraph, you can see that the person in the story has set up an imaginal act in their imagination, in their consciousness, an imaginary argument, and it sets in motion the exact same thing in reality. Now let's see the story Neville shares again here. He says, "Let me tell you the story of a very dear friend of mine. At the time, the costume designer at the music hall in New York." He doesn't share that it's his wife, but in another lecture he does. He says, "She told me one day of her difficulty working with one of the producers who invariably criticized and rejected her best work unjustly, that he was often rude and seemed deliberately unfair to her." I'm sure that you can resonate with this experience where you've had a boss that you didn't get along with. So, upon hearing her story, I reminded her, as I am reminding you, that men can only echo to us that which we whisper to them in secret. So, as you can see, the costume designer was whispering, which Neville means our internal conversations. Some links down there, my lovelies, to those lectures I've covered. So via our internal conversations, we set up this mental argument with whoever it is we think we're arguing with, but there is only us. It's a reflection of us, who we deem that other person to be. They're showing something back to us. Generally, it's for healing, but we'll go into that in another video. So the costume designer is having a mental argument with her boss. And in reality, she is going to do exactly what she did in her imagination, have an imaginary argument. In this case, you'll have the argument in reality. So Neville says, I had no doubt, but that she silently argued with the producer, not in the flesh, i.e. out here in our 3D reality, but in quiet moments to herself. She confessed that she did just that each morning as she walked to work. So from these few lines, you can see what Neville's saying about the costume designer. She walks to work mentally arguing with her boss. So she can change that. Now, Neville says, I asked her to change her attitude towards him. I say attitude in that tone because it's our attitudes that are ever important, as well as our moods, because our attitude, our mood dictates what comes to us via our 3D. He says, I asked her to change her attitude toward him, to assume that he was congratulating her on her fine designs, and she in turn was thanking him for his praise and kindness. That's what we need to do, my lovelies. This young designer took my advice, and as she walked to the theatre, she imagined a perfect relationship of the producer praising her work, and she in return responding with gratitude for his appreciation. Isn't that a more lovelier way to talk to your boss in an imaginary sense, in your quiet moments? So a real big warning right here. Be careful what you talk about, what your mind is focusing on, what your attitude is, what your moods are when you're alone and you're talking to yourself. Make them noble, happy, congratulating, and also Neville says, make them conform to your wishes fulfilled, i.e. if you're manifesting $1 million, I am rich. Those should be your internal conversations, not where is it, I can't see it, I can't have that, I can't afford it. Change those. 3D, my lovelies, is moving slower than your imagination. It takes time for 3D to catch up. So back to the story. This she did to catch up. So back to the story. This she did morning after morning, i.e. talking nicely to her boss. And in a very short while, she discovered for herself that her own attitude determined the scenery of her existence. The behaviour of the producer completely reversed itself. He became the most pleasant professional employer she had encountered. His behaviour merely echoed the changes that she had whispered within herself. What she did was by the power of imagination. Her fantasy led his, and she herself dictated to him the discourse they eventually had together at the time she was seemingly walking alone. Literally, you can have a mental argument with someone and then you kind of go out 2 or 3 weeks later, maybe sooner, and you're wondering why you've had an argument with your friend, whoever it was you were mentally arguing with. It's because you set it in motion yourself. So let's not do that. If something untoward like that comes up in your reality, revise it. There's links down there to revision. It's the most powerful technique of Neville's to undo the unlovely that we may have miscreated out here in our 3D. So, simple instructions here, my lovelies. If you have an argument with somebody, it's because of it's not them, it's not he, her, that, those people. It's us, my darlings. We did it in our imagination. We might not remember because, as Neville says, man is generically forgetful. We forget what we've sowed. So let's sow lovely seeds and talk about our bosses, friends, everyone with imaginative love, and carry on wonderful conversations. All right, my lovelies, leave a comment down there if you found this video useful. If you've changed some conversations within yourself, feel free to reach out. Feel free to leave a comment, subscribe, and a love and a like, because I love it and YouTube loves it too, and they'll raise my content. Appreciate your time and attention. Big fat kiss, because we're all about love up here, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.